The 2028 presidential race has already started. Potential candidates are releasing books that they totally wrote all by themselves and coming up with excuses to show up in early primary states. And every week we get new polls on what Democratic voters think about a potential primary. The most common way to understand a Democratic primary is with candidates jostling for control of one of the two major lanes within the party. The first lane is the more establishment centrist lane, represented in 2016 by Hillary Clinton and in 2020 by Joe Biden. The other lane is the progressive lane, represented in both 2016 and 2020 by Bernie Sanders. Especially in 2020, Bernie and Biden had to fight their way through a host of other potential candidates aspiring to have control over one of these lanes in order to have a clear shot at a primary victory. But I don't think this old two-lane model of the Democratic primary is going to hold exactly the same in 2028. In 2016, Clinton was the clear establishment pick because really she was supposed to be the candidate back in 2008 before she got beat by Obama. In 2020, Biden was the clear establishment pick because, well, he was Obama's vice president. Who can claim to be the clear establishment pick in 2028, though? Who would even want to take that title, considering we're living in a time of incredible hatred for all things establishment? This power vacuum opens up a ton of different possibilities for ambitious presidential candidates to make their case to the Democratic voter base on why they are best positioned to lead the party into the post-Trump age. I've split all the most talked about potential 2028 candidates into 9 categories, 9 different lanes that candidates I think will pitch themselves as representing as they attempt to jostle for control over the Democratic Party. It's entirely possible that I'm missing people or that I miscategorized some people. So please leave a comment letting me know how you would organize some of these potential candidates. Okay, let's go. The first category I have is the competent technocrats. In this category, you will find people whose pitch is that they are a steady hand in an age of total chaos at the federal level. All of these candidates have the kinds of resumes you might want if you were going to bring in a consultant to try and fix a failing company. They're not typically engaging in a very populist variety of politics as well. Let's start with Pete Buttigieg. Pete rose to national prominence with an unexpectedly well-performing campaign in 2020. Before that, he was a mayor. Before that, he was an intelligence officer in the Navy Reserves, and he also worked for McKinsey. Oh, and he was also a Rhodes Scholar, just to put a little icing on that I've wanted to be president since I was 5 cake. During the Biden administration, Buttigieg was transportation secretary. He was criticized a lot by the right wing after a train carrying hazardous materials derailed in Ohio, but I'm not really sure this would impact his chances in a Democratic primary. One of his biggest media highlights as transportation secretary was a big push for consumer protections in air travel.
The Biden-Harris administration is now going to require airlines to give passengers an automatic cash refund if your flight is canceled or significantly delayed.
I'd also expect that any future campaign by Mayor Pete would highlight the amount of bridges built, miles of road repaired, that kind of stuff during his tenure as secretary. All of this would help bolster his image as a guy who's focused on fixing everyday issues. Pete's also developed a reputation as something of a debater. He's known for throwing down on Fox News, which is frankly something that not every Democrat is willing or able to do. Pete has 2 kids with his husband Chasten, and Pete's ability to speak about his family in an engaging way has earned him a lot of praise. Moving on to Abigail Spanberger. She recently came to national prominence when she won the governor's race pretty convincingly in Virginia. Before this, she was in the House of Representatives, and before that, she was a CIA officer. Her campaign website highlights her record as the most bipartisan member of Congress from Virginia and her effectiveness as a legislator. Her campaign was also hailed as a victory for the affordability agenda. Here's how she opened her victory speech after winning the race for governor.
You all chose leadership that will focus relentlessly on what matters most. Lowering costs, keeping our communities safe, and strengthening our economy for every Virginian.
I think there's a case to be made that Spanberger also belongs in the sensible centrist category that we're going to get to later, but to me, her image feels more about being a competent, steady hand at the wheel. I will grant that some of the difference between these categories is just vibes, but that's how I see it. I think there's a good shot we see a Spanberger 2028 run if she has the ambition for it. Since Virginia prevents governors from serving consecutive terms, 2028 will look like a pretty enticing option. Rounding out our competent technocrat category, we have Maryland Governor Wes Moore. Before serving as governor, Moore was in the Army and, like Buttigieg, was a Rhodes Scholar. He also worked in banking at Deutsche Bank and Citibank. Since then, he has founded or worked at several companies and nonprofits. Most notably, he was CEO of the anti-poverty nonprofit, the Robin Hood Foundation. He's projected himself as a basically pragmatic guy and began Trump's second term by rankling some Democrats whenever he kept the door open to working with the Trump administration. However, the proximity of Wes Moore's Maryland to Trump's D.C. has given the governor plenty of opportunities to fight with the administration and boost his resist cred. Most recently, they had a fight about a sewage spill in the Potomac River. Moore has been seen as a rising star in the Democratic Party for a while. He was granted a coveted DNC speaking spot in 2024, where he talked about patriotism and working hard, as well as his personal story. Exactly the kind of speech you'd expect to see from a future presidential candidate. Wes Moore is also currently the only black governor in the United States.
It's the journey of a man raised by a remarkable immigrant single mom, a man who felt handcuffs on his wrists at 11 years old, who now stands before you as the 63rd governor of Maryland and the first black governor in the history of our state.
Moving on to our next category, we have the swing state savant. In American politics, it is common knowledge that not all states matter equally. Really, most of the presidential campaign is focused on a few tightly contested swing states that determine the outcome of elections. These candidates are known for their proven ability to win in tough environments, and this fact is certainly going to be a big part of their potential presidential campaigns. First up, we have Ruben Gallego, senator from Arizona. Gallego is a Marine Corps veteran and had legislative experience in the Arizona House and the U.S. House before making the jump to the 2024 Senate race. Gallego faced Kari Lake, current Trump administration official, in that Senate race and won with 50.1% of the vote. This was seen as very impressive in a state that Kamala Harris only received 46% of the vote in. I think he's shown himself to be a pretty able political operator. He's received a lot of hype from centrist think tank types for his message on immigration. He's talked about border security and criticized the Biden administration for not doing enough on the issue. He's also gotten a lot of coverage for his pretty unique commentary on why Democrats did so poorly with Latino men in 2024.
In an interview with the New York Times,
Yes.
you said that what Latino men want is to own a big-ass truck, which is connected very much to what you were just saying.
Yeah.
And I assume you would say the point is broader than Latino men. It's
Yes.
men and women. It's
Men and women, it's everything. Yeah.
Asian, black, and white Americans.
Yeah, I mean, I said that mostly just to kind of break through this, because I've heard it so much, like, why do Latino men go this way? I'm like, well, Latino men want things. And so to kind of break through, like, you have to keep it simple. You know, they want security. They want economic security, and they want physical security for their family. And their wants are legitimate. We shouldn't just, shy away from or ignore it because it puts us in an uncomfortable spot. So the troquita, the truck, it's symbolic because it really is a status symbol that you have succeeded in this country.
I think Gallego recognizes the power of things seeming orderly versus chaotic in a way that very few politicians do. Listen to the way he talks about securing the border versus the Trump administration's ICE actions in this clip.
And I wish that the president would understand that there's ways for us to have security, have immigration enforcement, have border security without this type of methods that they're doing, which is essentially scaring and bringing chaos to our neighborhoods.
A lot of people might think that there's a contradiction in wanting to push for more border security while at the same time criticizing the Trump administration on ICE. We think of those things as both immigration issues with clear liberal and conservative positions. What Gallego does is frame them both as order issues, which I think is closer to how most people view them. People felt like the border was disorderly, even though claiming asylum was a perfectly legal thing to do. People also hate the chaos that they're seeing when Trump's private army goes marching down city streets. Anyway, just something to consider. Our next swing state savant is Senator from Georgia, Jon Ossoff. Jon Ossoff has attracted a lot of attention lately for a few speeches that he's given as part of his re-election bid.
Now, you remember, we were told that MAGA was for working class Americans. You remember that? But this is a government of, by, and for the ultra-rich. It is the wealthiest cabinet ever. This is the Epstein class ruling our country.
His relatively moderate politics, infused with a kind of populist rhetoric that feels very of the current moment, combined with his proven ability to win in a tough swing state, gives him a very strong 2028 case if he's able to win re-election in November. He's typically seen as a pretty moderate Democrat. He supports Democrats when it counts, but he opposes some landmark progressive causes like Medicare for All and the Green New Deal. Before becoming senator, he was a documentary filmmaker, and he rose to national media attention with a failed congressional run in 2017. That race was heavily covered and at the time was the most expensive House race in history. He was elected to the Senate in a runoff election in 2021, beating incumbent David Perdue. That race featured a super iconic moment where Ossoff debated an empty podium after his opponent declined to attend a debate. Fun fact about this runoff, I was in Atlanta at the time canvassing, and the day after the election was won, January 5th, we had a debrief call basically celebrating the win. This was on January 6th. So I remember having the Zoom call up on my laptop celebrating this insane win by Ossoff and Warnock while watching the January 6th riot at the Capitol on my Airbnb TV. Kind of crazy. Anyway, as with a lot of these people, there will be plenty who worry about what would happen to the Senate seat if Ossoff leaves it. Could anyone else win it? Would this prevent him from running for president? I understand the concerns, but I'm telling you, if any of these people have the slightest ambition of running for president, they are going to be running for president whenever they get the opportunity. Next up, we have Raphael Warnock, also from Georgia and also elected at the same time as Ossoff, so I won't repeat myself too much there, but it's worth noting that Warnock's first election was technically a special election for an incomplete term, so he had to run again in 2022. Obviously, he won both times. Warnock's background is as a pastor. He's been the senior pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church since 2005. Ebenezer Baptist Church is most notable as having been Martin Luther King Jr.'s church. As a politician, Warnock is notable for being able to speak about religion with an authority that not many Democratic politicians can claim. He's similarly moderate to Ossoff, though GovTrack did award him the distinction of being the most politically right Democrat in the Senate in 2024. Lately, Warnock has attracted some attention for his role in a piece of high-profile housing legislation that would ban investors who own more than 350 properties from purchasing single-family homes.
And I was proud to lead the negotiation to ensure this private equity ban was included in the bipartisan housing package. I worked closely with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to get this across the finish line.
For our last swing state savant, we are going back to Arizona, or should I say a couple hundred miles above Arizona, because we are talking, of course, about former astronaut Mark Kelly. His career is in the Navy and then at NASA. I genuinely think half the reason people talk about Mark Kelly as a potential presidential contender is because astronauts are cool. And you know what? Fair enough. He's been in the Senate since 2020, filling John McCain's seat, and has been reelected since. This gives him a track record of being able to deliver in a critical state for Democrats. Lately, though, Kelly has been at the center of one of the bigger recent controversies involving the Trump administration. He took part in the famous "You Can Refuse Illegal Orders" video put out by several Democrats in Congress that are also veterans.
We want to speak directly to members of the military
and the intelligence community
who take risks each day to keep Americans safe.
We know you are under enormous stress and pressure right now.
Americans trust their military,
but that trust is at risk. Our laws are clear. You can refuse illegal orders.
You can refuse illegal orders.
You must refuse illegal orders.
Trump called the video seditious behavior punishable by death, and the Pentagon has since been trying to punish Kelly by demoting him from captain in retirement, which would reduce his retirement pay. This whole affair has really boosted Kelly's profile as a critic of the Trump administration, even though he remains a fairly moderate senator. Mark Kelly is also married to Gabby Giffords, who is a former member of Congress that survived an assassination attempt in 2011. Before we move on, I just want to say, if you are not subscribed to the channel, I am like 300 subscribers away from 30,000, and I would love to reach that milestone. Really hope you're enjoying the video. Let's get back to it. The third category I have here is the sensible centrist category. These are the politicians who have, in one way or another, sought to differentiate themselves from the mainstream of the Democratic Party by making bipartisanship, moderation, and appeals to the center a central part of their strategy. The first contender in this category is Josh Shapiro. I think there's an argument he belongs in the swing state savant category too, since he's from Pennsylvania, but he's been in politics for more than 20 years, longer than any of the people I put in that category. And I feel like a key factor for the swing state savant category is feeling somewhat new in a way that Shapiro just can't. Shapiro might as well already be running. He recently released a memoir. We thank the brave journalists who are paid to read all these books that presidential hopefuls apparently still feel like they're obligated to put out in the age of social media. The New York Times highlighted some key themes from his book, which gives us a little insight into how he's planning to pitch himself to the party in 2028. It's no secret that Shapiro was considered as a potential running mate for Harris, but it's also no secret that this selection process apparently got ugly and he ultimately was not selected. Previously, what most people heard is that Shapiro was apparently pushing too much too fast to figure out what his responsibilities would be in a future Harris administration. Harris and her team apparently thought he was too ambitious and they did not like that, so they did not go with him. In Shapiro's memoir, he gives his own take on the process, criticizing the Harris campaign for asking him questions like this.
You were asked, have you ever been an agent of the Israeli government?
Yes.
And they also asked you if you were a double agent for Israel.
They actually asked if I was an agent and if I had ever spoken to an undercover, agent of the Israeli government.
Shapiro was also an outspoken critic of the pro-Palestine campus protests, which apparently caused friction with the Harris campaign as well. Aside from that, the book highlights how Shapiro preferred less strict COVID regulations than what many other Democrats supported. Another area where Shapiro has broken with the Democratic mainstream is with his support of school vouchers, typically a very Republican-coded policy that allows public money to be spent on private school tuition. It's also worth noting, given generally rising anti-Semitism, that Shapiro and his family were the victims of an arson attack on the first night of Passover in 2025. The next sensible centrist is Gretchen Whitmer, governor of Michigan. She's been in politics since 2001 and is typically considered a very high-tier presidential candidate due to her ability to win in Michigan, which is a crucial swing state. Whitmer's method of appearing more centrist compared to the rest of the Democratic Party has undoubtedly been the degree to which she's been willing to work publicly with the Trump administration. Last year, she had an awkward moment where she thought she was going to be having a one-on-one meeting with Trump, but turns out there were a bunch of other people in the Oval Office as well, and she ended up hiding her face from the cameras with a folder. More recently, she met with the Trump administration to get him to provide emergency aid for an ice storm and to get him to work with Michigan on keeping invasive carp out of the Great Lakes. Unfortunately for Whitmer, who I'm sure is trying to appear pragmatic without getting too close to Trump, the president took the opportunity of the meeting on the invasive carp to make a governor of Canada joke about Mark Carney. She's recently made the point that she is criticized all the time for taking these meetings with Trump while politicians like Zohran Mamdani are praised for doing so. We will see if the Democratic voters buy this in 2028. Next is Rahm Emanuel, former Obama White House chief of staff, former mayor of Chicago, current guy who wants the Democratic Party to stop being so woke. I should probably avoid making too many jokes about Rahm Emanuel. He once sent a dead fish to a pollster that offended him. The Atlantic says that the basic idea of Rahm Emanuel 2028 is that he is a politically incorrect, tell it like it is fighter. He was accused of cynically triangulating by a lot of liberals when he appeared on Megyn Kelly and talked about transgender issues. But that is not the only show he's been on, probably to compensate for the fact that he does not currently have an elected office, so he has less of a platform than a lot of the other 2028 hopefuls. He's been all over the podcast circuit.
You have criticized the Democratic Party. You've called it toxic. You've called it weak and woke. You've also criticized Republicans, for sure. But I'm an equal opportunity critic.
Putting aside the news he's made on culture stuff, Rahm is a pretty typical Clinton-type Democrat. A Rahm 2028 run would undoubtedly be entertaining. He's known for being mean and aggressive. You could imagine what the debates would be like. But I think it's going to take a lot more boosting of his profile, a lot more podcasting to get him on the stage in the first place. Our final sensible centrist is Roy Cooper, former governor of North Carolina and current Senate candidate of course, also in North Carolina. He's in a similar situation to Shapiro in that I think I could put him in a few different categories, but I decided to put him here because I think his pitch is really something like friendly guy focused on normal issues. The policy page on his website is just called Make Stuff Cost Less. He's an interesting candidate to me because I think a lot of the affordability agenda type Democrats slot very neatly into the technocrat category. But Cooper feels like he goes in a different niche. I could see that broadening his coalition in an interesting way. At the same time, though, Cooper is going to have some challenges. He's 68 years old, which is still young enough to make Trump look ancient, to be fair, but he'll be on the older side of the 2028 Democratic primary field if he runs. And after 3 terms of the oldest presidents ever, I wonder if people will be looking for somebody a little younger. Moving right along, our next category is the Republican whisperers. These candidates are distinct because political observers often assert that they have something special about them that helps them appeal to Trump voters, specifically the kind of mythologized white working class Trump voter that maybe used to vote Democrat but no longer does. First up is Andy Beshear, the Democratic governor of Kentucky, a state that went 64% for Trump. Any Democrat that's able to win in that kind of environment is going to draw speculation about a presidential run. So what's Beshear's history? Well, he became Attorney General of Kentucky in 2015 and then governor in 2019. He won re-election in 2023, proving that he had some staying power. His career undoubtedly has been given a boost by the fact that Beshear's father, Steve Beshear, was governor of Kentucky from 2007 to 2015. Andy Beshear has made pretty good use of the fact that Kentucky Republicans have campaigned on pretty unpopular draconian abortion restrictions. Beshear also has a reputation of being an effective manager and communicator on things that aren't necessarily partisan, like disaster response and relief. Beshear has won some significant praise from the left for his veto of anti-trans legislation, and that decision in particular attracted a lot of attention because he justified it using his faith.
When I've taken actions like vetoing the nastiest piece of anti-LGBTQ legislation that ever came through my state, I described it in those terms. I said, my faith teaches me that all children are children of God. Yeah. And I didn't want people picking on those kids.
Yeah, 100% agree on that.
It'll be interesting to see if Beshear's brand of politics plays outside Kentucky. He has a lot of fans in the media, that's for sure. And 2028, we'll find out if they like his policies as much as they like his accent. Next up is a big if, James Talarico of Texas. Now, if Talarico wins in Texas, he goes straight to the top tier of likely candidates. The man who finally flipped Texas blue. He might as well be pulling the sword out of the stone. And I know I already said it, but it doesn't matter that he'd be giving up a seat that maybe nobody else could win. If he has a modicum of ambition, he's running. His campaign slogan is, "It's time to start flipping tables," which is obviously a reference to Jesus running the money changers out of the temple. That slogan alone should give you an idea of the kind of liberal Christian populism that Talarico is trying to leverage as part of his campaign. Lots of people seem to be a little surprised by Talarico's liberal Christianity. I'm not totally sure what they were expecting from a Presbyterian Church USA seminarian. Just kidding. But regardless, his ability to speak about religious issues with authority has captured the attention of a lot of people, including Joe Rogan. Being interviewed by Joe Rogan brought Talarico to the national stage in a way that he hadn't been before.
Interesting to see a person who is a Christian who is not for the 10 Commandments in schools.
Yeah.
And I think you made a very compelling argument, you know.
I grew up in a tradition that cherished the separation of church and state, not just because it protects the church or protects democracy, but it is what allows this democracy to happen where we can all have different faith traditions and live together in peace.
Our last Republican whisperer is Maine Senate candidate Graham Platner, a man who personifies the kind of left populist common man aesthetic that many progressives are hoping can be successful in more rural and conservative parts of the country that might have a distaste for more buttoned up types of Democrats. He's in a similar situation to Talarico where he's got to first win if he wants a shot at the big time. But if he does win and knocks out the stubbornly incumbent Susan Collins, I could see him taking a shot at it. You know, if the scandals don't prove to be too much. His career before the Senate run is in the military, then as a military contractor, then as an oyster farmer. Platner's success would be another feather in the cap for Fight Agency, a Democratic media consulting group started by former Sanders and Fetterman people that's doing work for left-wing populists throughout the country. You might recognize one of their more recent success stories.
I'm Assemblyman Zahran Mamdani, and I'm running for mayor to freeze the rent for every rent-stabilized tenant.
Wait, you're gonna freeze my rent?
Yes.
Did I hear rent freeze?
Yes, this guy's gonna freeze the rent. No hike?
None.
This guy's gonna freeze the rent.
It's true. As your next mayor, I will freeze your rent.
But speaking of left-wing populists, let's move on to a category that I know many of you have been waiting for, the Bernie left. The Bernie left is in an interesting place right now because certainly Bernie Sanders is too old to run for president again, but his campaigns influenced a whole generation of progressive activists and politicians. The clear heir to the Bernie left, so much so that she will clear the field of almost any other Bernie left candidate that's even considering running, is AOC. What even needs to be said about AOC? She's a Democratic socialist. She rocketed into politics by beating a 10-term incumbent in a primary. Since then, she's been one of the most left-wing voices in elected national politics.
We are here together because an extreme concentration of power, greed, and corruption is taking over our country like never before.
According to YouGov, she's the 5th most popular Democrat in the party and the most popular Democrat not named Kamala Harris that could feasibly run. She's got a ton of options. She could stay in the House and try and work her way up the ranks there. She could try and primary Chuck Schumer for senator. I personally think, like I've said for a couple other candidates, if she has the ambition to run for president, she'll probably at least try and do it in 2028 when the field is wide open. If she doesn't run, some other people might try and fill her Bernie left lane. Greg Kazar, maybe. I met him in Austin once, and he's a pretty nice guy. The only person I can see right now trying to run in this lane that wouldn't just immediately be cleared out by AOC is Congressman from California, Ro Khanna. Ro Khanna was a national co-chair for Bernie's 2020 campaign and has spent the years since then developing his political brand. His sometimes idiosyncratic behavior has given us online political people the great Ro Khanna cycle meme. Khanna is very gifted in a way few are with identifying salient political issues and capitalizing on them before others do. He's a political entrepreneur, if you will. And in that way, he really represents the spirit of his district, which is right in the heart of Silicon Valley. Most notably, he's been a leader in the Release the Epstein Files saga, along with Libertarian Republican Thomas Massie. He's also introduced legislation with Bernie Sanders to create a 5% wealth tax on billionaires. Another category you've probably been looking forward to is the anti-Trump category. These are people who are defining themselves primarily by their fervent opposition to the Trump administration in any way possible. If you're on this channel, you already know about Gavin Newsom, governor of California, and man who looks like he'd play the president on TV. Newsom is clearly trying to be something of an opposition leader for Democrats in the age of Trump. He has his press account Talk Like Trump on Twitter. He follows Trump to Davos and throws out Trump-themed knee pads. The guy hates Trump, and he wants you to know that. He's also been super active in the new media space, playing Fortnite and talking to people like Adam Friedland, as well as hosting his own podcast where he's often taken some heat, actually, for playing too nice with conservatives. But Newsom is betting that you and most other people won't really care about this in 2028. Gavin is betting that being the most visibly anti-Trump candidate, both in his rhetorical style and with his substantive actions, like doing a gerrymander in California to counteract Trump's mid-decade redistricting efforts, will win him trust, even among people who think he's a wishy-washy establishment political animal. After Newsom, we have Chris Van Hollen, senator from Maryland, who you might remember from his trip to El Salvador to get proof of life for Kilmar Abrego Garcia after he was wrongly deported. Van Hollen has been less out there than someone like Newsom, but his role in the Abrego Garcia case absolutely won him a lot of goodwill and raised his profile. I include him in this list because people do talk about him as a potential 2028 candidate, and he's doing some of the things that you might expect from a potential candidate, like bandying around flashy policies that have no chance of passing in this Congress, but do grab a lot of headlines. After Van Hollen, we have J.B. Pritzker, whose appeal I can only describe as being like the thinking man's Gavin Newsom. He's also a very anti-Trump governor of a blue state, and he has built a lot of his political brand in the second Trump administration off of this fact. Here's him talking about ICE, for example.
The MAGA Republican-supported invasion of Portland and Chicago and LA and Washington, D.C. is not making us any safer. Instead, it is putting our people in danger.
He's a billionaire, which might cause him a little bit of trouble with some progressives, but it does mean that he has the ability to finance an expensive campaign himself. He's generally praised as being a good manager in Illinois. He's improved the state's financial status. He's also pretty generally progressive. He successfully raised Illinois' minimum wage to $15 an hour. But again, I think his main appeal right now is being a stable bulwark against the Trump administration that isn't interested in doing the kind of attention-grabbing stuff that someone like Newsom is always doing. Moving on, we have the Warren left, which you might notice is represented by a bunch of question marks. In the 2020 primary, Elizabeth Warren carved out an interesting left-wing, but also kind of technocratic lane that made her the favorite of a lot of liberal policy types. Warren has a plan for that, was her rallying cry. Today, Elizabeth Warren is 76 years old, meaning she's probably too old to run for president in 2028. I think this leaves a massive opening for any of the people that I've mentioned so far that aren't feeling super distinct in their lanes to seize the opening, become the left-wing policy wonk candidate. I think I could see a version of maybe Cory Booker or someone like that tries to pull off a reinvention like this. Now, Cory Booker is to the right of Elizabeth Warren for sure, but I think he wants to run for president, and he's been throwing out some policy ideas. Most recently, he has a plan to make the first $75,000 of earnings tax-free and raise taxes on richer Americans. This is not the same as Warren wanting to mandate a certain number of workers on company boards, not by a long shot, but I could see a world where Booker or someone else who wants to seem a little more distinct try and seize this lane. Another person who might try and seize this lane in order to build a new political identity is, you knew it was coming at some point, Kamala Harris. Harris does not need much introduction. Former AG in California, former senator from California, and former vice president. Just by virtue of being the Democratic Party's most recent nominee, she is sort of the default choice for a lot of people in 2028. In polling, she's almost always at the top, or at least near the top of the list when Democrats are asked who'd they support in 2028. The question that Harris faces is similar to the one that she faced in 2024. How can she build an independent political identity? Due to the circumstances of her previous campaign, she really couldn't do much to be independent of Biden. But she's going to have to figure something out if she wants to run in 2028. I really do think that in the first election for the post-Trump era, voters are going to be looking for somebody that doesn't feel like they are from this era, from the past. She might take that Warren left lane that I talked about. She might do something entirely different. I think there's worlds where she spins her campaign in all sorts of different directions if she wants to run. The biggest challenge that she's going to have in the primary, though, is, of course, she lost in 2024. The fact that the circumstances were very strange for her campaign might convince voters to let her have another shot at it, though. I guess we'll see. The last category I have here is the wild cards. These are celebrities or people from outside politics that political analysts often speculate might run. Due to the nature of this category being about outsiders, it's impossible to get everyone in here, but here's a few rapid fire style. Jon Stewart, Daily Show host, comedian, man who made Tucker Carlson stop wearing bow ties.
I think your lectures are boring. Let me ask you a question on the news.
No, this is theater. I mean, it's obvious. How old are you?
35.
And you wear a bow tie.
Yeah, I do. I do.
So he would almost certainly run a Bernie-ish left populist campaign, but he's also got some interesting patriotic credibility doing work for 9/11 first responders. Next is Stephen A. Smith, sports TV personality and commentator. In the past couple years, he's mused about a potential presidential run. He'd probably run as a relatively more conservative Democrat, I think. Finally, Mark Cuban, billionaire investor and entrepreneur. Cuban was a surrogate for Harris in 2024 and is also famous from Shark Tank. He'd probably call for a mix of higher taxes on rich people. He's occasionally talked about that before, while at the same time pushing the Democratic Party to take more business-friendly stances. The Mark Cuban case, I suppose, is that maybe a billionaire TV businessman is just the optimal background to have in this era of American politics. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and help me get to 30,000 subscribers. Don't forget to like the video and leave me a comment telling me how I got all this wrong and how you would do it totally differently. I also want to take a second to thank all my channel members. You make me doing this possible. I really appreciate you. If you want to become a channel member, hit the join button below this video or on my channel page. Okay, I'll see you next time.